I now call on the TUI President Anthony Quinn to respond to the Minister's address on behalf of TUI.
Ira James Lawless, a Carja, a Coglacia agus a Vald in TUI, to Fulcher Roiv, Higan Coblian, Blaintual, and Aintus Munteriaran. Ga an buchas lat a bhéling in you, agus tá sé táthach duine go dag an Iran lá, as ar gór an Aintus Shaw, hon éisteach go ddíireach leis na daine tá gobar an talamh gach eile lá. I dríú level, sa bhreis idicus, in idicus éasach agus in Newtreach. Ní criniú garnach é seo, ní chinnal jas shalavorí a bhain é seo, is chinnal sean ólia é, is chinnal clachtarí é seo, is chinnal daoine a conian arneal mór phobli in a seasamh trína godibra, trína nílsacht agus trí jung bhéilteach féin. Agus do na toscarí ile sa bhahala seo gá an buchas ó chríliamh, bala dhia ar an obair. Minister, you come before Congress this afternoon after delegates have already turned to the hard business of this union: pensions, third-level conditions of service, adult education, FET, youth reach, and pay. That matters, Minister. It matters. It matters because you are not hearing from an abstract sector. You are hearing from a union that has already set out in debate and decision the realities of precarious contracts, broken industrial structures, delayed payments, inconsistent implementation, workload intensification, and the widening gap between ministerial ambition and members' lived experience. So let me be direct, because there's no value in politeness if it is used to soften the truth. This afternoon is not whether further and higher education matters. We know, and it matters to us. The question is whether the state is prepared to treat the people who deliver it with the seriousness their work deserves. That is the issue, and that is the challenge. The state does not get to praise educational excellence while normalising institutional neglect. Because too much of the conversation around this sector is now conducted in the language of vision, reform, pathways, flexibility, tertiary cohesion, future skills, and national competitiveness. All of that has its place, but a system does not become serious because it has learned to speak seriously about itself. A sector is not transformed by adjectives. A college does not improve because it has been rebranded. A forum does not become effective because it has been named. A department does not discharge its responsibility by describing its intentions in elegant terms. Reality lays somewhere else. Reality is found in briefing notes. It is found in pay slips, timetables, contracts, and workloads. Reality lays in the lecturer still waiting for nationally significant matters to be progressed in a forum supposedly created to do just that. Reality lays in the adult educator left dealing with inconsistent implementation, delayed payments, and contractual confusion. Reality lays in the FET teacher asked to carry QQI workload, digitisation, structural churn and so-called college of the future without nationally agreed protections. Reality lays in the Youth Reach staff member who has heard enough warm words to wallpaper the room and is still waiting for actual movement on the calendar and supports. Minister, this is where your department is judged. This is where seriousness lives or dies. And that is why this speech needs to be plain. Because members across these sectors are tired of drift. They are tired of delay. They are tired of fragmentation. They are tired of local workarounds for national failures. And they are tired of being told that progress is being made while the same core issues remain unresolved from one Congress to the next. A system that survives on workarounds is a system admitting its own failure. Let me begin in third level, because the mood in that sector has hardened, not into abstract dissatisfaction, but into something more serious than that. A growing conviction that too much which should have been settled nationally is being left to drift, to localise or to languish in structures that provide discussion without conclusion. Across the sector, there is a palpable sense that workload is intensifying. Career pathways remain uncertain. Memorandums of understanding between TUs are being eroded. Precarious employment is still tolerated. And issues that should be resolved once nationally and clearly are instead recycled from institution to institution as though instability were somehow normal. What should be settled by national agreement is being left to institutional chance. And nowhere is that clearer than in the Higher Education Forum for Academic Grades, or as we call it, FHERIS. Let us stop pretending that this forum is functioning as it should. At this point, FHERIS is not an engine of progress. It is becoming a monument to drift, and nobody ever built decent conditions of service with a monument. It was supposed to be a place where nationally significant issues in the sector could be tackled nationally, where structures, conditions, and reoccurring problems could be solved with clarity and authority. Instead, far too often, it has become a place where matters are aired, noted, deferred, and then returned to in much the same state months later. A national forum that does not produce national outcomes is not a serious industrial structure. It is a holding pattern. It is delay given a title. It is consultation without consequence. Members do not need another chamber for discussion. They need decisions, delivery, and closure. And if FHERIS cannot progress the issues that matter, workload, career structure, professorship, circular letters, memorandi that remain unresolved, timetable alleviations, contract precarity, and researchers' pensions, then it is not merely ineffective. It is failing the sector it was supposed to serve. Minister, Your department cannot stand back from that failure, because when national machinery fails, the damage does not remain in the machinery, it lands on workers. Because the present situation suits nobody except those who prefer ambiguity, fragmentation, and drift, it does not suit lecturers. It does not suit researchers. It does not suit students. And it certainly does not suit a sector that is supposed to be coherent, modern, and nationally organised. If a matter is of national significance, it should be dealt with nationally. If a condition of service applies across the sector, it should not depend on local management, mood, or institutional whim. And if a forum exists for sectoral negotiation, then let it negotiate. Let it reach agreement. Let it conclude, and let it deliver. The same point applies to pay. When cooperation is secured, payment must follow. When agreements are made, they must be honoured. When members have delivered, neither employers nor government can simply retreat behind process, delay, or reinterpretation. There is now deep and understandable anger across the technological sector that pay linked to an agreed change, including cooperation around the introduction of professorships and related local bargaining elements, has now not been delivered with the clarity and timeliness that members were entitled to expect. Delay in payment is not neutral. Delay is a decision. Delay is a signal. Delay says to members, our cooperation is immediate, but your obligations are optional. And after a point, Minister, delay becomes disrespect. Agus ní glachamid le sin. Minister Lawless, we in the TUI welcome your commentary on the national apprenticeships in your address. However, if reform in apprenticeships, further education or higher education is to succeed, it cannot be designed at a remove from those who deliver it every day. It must be shaped through genuine consultation with the TUI and with staff on the ground before change is proposed, during its development and implementation, and after it is introduced, so that its impact can be properly assessed and its shortcomings addressed. Too often, those with the deepest knowledge of the system, the lecturers, teachers, and staff who sustain it, are brought in simply too late, when decisions have already been framed, when consultation becomes a formality rather than a meaningful process. That approach does not build confidence, does not secure trust, and does not lead to durable reform. If government is serious about building a strong, responsive, and respected apprenticeship system, and about advancing any wider reform agenda across higher and further education, then it must recognise that those at the front line are not obstacles to change, but essential partners in making change work. Their experience is not incidental, it is indispensable. They understand the pressures on the apprenticeship provision, the realities of the programme delivery, the needs of the students and the apprentices, and the practical conditions required for reform to take root successfully. This is why consultation with the TUI and the staff side must not take place on the margins or after difficulties emerge, but at the heart of the process, from beginning to end, because meaningful engagement is not an optional extra in reform. It is the foundation of reform that if it is to be credible, effective, and capable of lasting success. And the difficulties third level is experiences not only about pay. It is also about the basic shape of working life. Lecturers are carrying excessive and increasingly complex workloads. Program coordination, online delivery, student support, research expectations, administration and institutional change have all expanded, yet the national structures governing workload and recognition have not kept pace. Too many colleagues remain trapped in forms of precarity that should long since have been consigned to the past. Too many issues that should have been resolved through a series of national industrial relations processes remain mired in ambiguity. Too many researchers are left facing pension injustice that has gone on for years. No fair-minded person could defend this. Minister, no speech about the future of education can ignore the world our students and staff are living through. Across Palestine, and again now in the shadow of a widening conflict involving Iran and the wider region, we are witnessing devastation, grief, and a terrible erosion of the basic protections that international law is supposed to guarantee. Ireland has itself called for an immediate and permanent ceasefire in Gaza, for the full resumption of humanitarian aid, and for the restraint and diplomacy in relation to Iran and the wider Middle East. These positions matter, but they must be matched by a continued political pressure from every part of the government. I am asking you, as a senior minister, to use your office and your voice to advocate for peace, for humanitarian solidarity and the protection of civilian life. Minister, we in this Congress Hall want to make sure that you remind your government colleagues that education cannot be separated from the moral conditions in which young people are asked to grow, to think, and hope. And let me say this plainly. If government is serious about justice, then it must honour its own commitment on the Occupied Territories Bill. The programme for government committed to advancing legislation in this area, and parliamentary replies in March 2026 stated that the main purpose of this bill was to prohibit the importation of goods from Israeli settlements in the occupied Palestinian territory. That promise now needs to be kept. The suffering in Gaza is not an abstraction. And the question of illegal settlement trade is not a matter that can be infinitely deferred. Ireland should act in line with its stated principles, and your government should do now what it said it would do. Minister, we note the announcement of the partnership between Dundalk Institute of Technology and Queen's University Belfast to establish a university college. DKIT has made a major contribution to the educational, social and economic life of the North East over many years. TUI members locally have campaigned over many years, including through industrial action, for DKT to achieve university status. That campaign was always rooted in a clear belief that the Institute, its students, its staff, and wider North East region deserve the status, recognition and investment that should follow from a university-level institution. In that context, we welcome any development that has the potential to advance that goal and to strengthen higher education provision in the region. However, our position is equally clear on the protections that must apply. At every stage of this process, the terms and conditions of employment of our members must be fully protected. There must be meaningful consultation, timely communications, and a serious engagement with any concerns raised by staff and their union. Minister, we cannot have any more surprises. Change cannot be imposed from above or managed through vague assurances. Where issues arise, they must be addressed as a matter of urgency. And where our expectations are not met, the TUI will act immediately to defend the interest of our members. It is also important that this development does not leave other institutions behind. IADT is now the only remaining institute of technology outside an existing technological university or planned university college project. This cannot be allowed to continue. IADT must be facilitated in achieving university status, and the necessary funding and resources must be provided to make that happen. The state must ensure that progress for one institution does not mean delay or neglect for another. Minister, if third level is marked by drift in national structures, the position in FET is marked by a different but related danger. The use of modernisation to push through change without agreed frameworks. The phrase FET College of the Future may sound catchy. It may suit a strategy paper. It may look well on a briefing document. But members know that behind that language, in too many places, lies a much less attractive reality. Structural changes introduced without clear national agreements, increased travel demands, altered reporting arrangements, merged programs, intensified verification and authentication burdens, and the quiet transfer of extra work onto staff without corresponding protections. A college of the future cannot be built on the erosion of present conditions. There is nothing modern about old-fashioned unilateralism. It cannot be built on the assumption that every structural idea generated by management is somehow self-justifying. Minister, let me be very clear in relation to the report recently issued from your department as regards the evaluation of Irish FET practitioner staffing structures in ETBs against international comparators. The TUI cannot accept these recommendations as a basis for reform. The report does not propose limited adjustment. It proposes a fundamental recasting of FET staffing, contracts and governance. At its core, it is a plan to replace existing arrangements with 3 new learner-facing roles. Removement of the current structure and attachment of new pay scales and conditions of employment to those new roles. It also proposes that staff who do not move immediately could remain on existing contracts only as a residual category. For the TUI, that is not modernisation in any reasonable sense. It is a wholesale restructuring of established roles, professional identities, and negotiated conditions. It is therefore a clear no-go area. We are especially concerned that the report represents flexibility as the answer to almost every challenge in FHET. But the practical meaning of that flexibility is clear from the text. The panel explicitly argues for annualised hours, for the organisation of year-round, evening and weekend teaching, and for wider management discretion over the mix of teaching and non-teaching duties and CPD. It also recommends delegated authority from the FHET staffing budgets for each ETB. Taken together, these proposals would shift power away from nationally agreed protections and towards local budget-driven deployment. From the TUI's perspective, that is a recipe for erosion of terms and conditions, for uneven practice between ETBs, and for the normalisation of longer, less predictable and less secure working arrangements. The report also proposes that the new roles would not require teaching council registration, while at the same time making annual CPD a contractual requirement. That is the wrong combination. It weakens an established professional framework on one hand, while creating new mandatory obligations on the other. The TUI is not opposed to professional development. We support high-quality CPD that is properly resourced and agreed, but compulsory CPD tied to a new contract structure alongside the removal of existing professional safeguards is not professional support. It is a top-down re-engineering of the workforce. Most importantly, Minister, lasting reform in FHET will not be built by setting aside existing agreements. The report itself acknowledges that implementation will require partnership with unions and other stakeholders. That must mean genuine negotiation, not a predetermined blueprint for the new roles, new hours, new obligations, and new budget controls. The TUI is ready to engage on improvements to FHET, but we will not accept proposals that undermine established contracts, dilute professional standing, and replace negotiated protections with managerial decisions. I repeat, Minister, the recommendations as they stand are a no-go area for our union. Our members in FHET are already dealing with growing QQI workload, with digitised assessment processes that have increased rather than reduced pressure, with inconsistencies around hours and contracts, with unresolved questions around CPD status, and with calendars and working arrangements that in some cases are being altered in ways that place even more pressure on members, already stretched thin. The cumulative effect is to make members feel that reform is something done to them rather than with them. Any reform imposed without agreement is not reform at all. It is an instruction, Minister. So the message to you today is simple. If you want modernisation, negotiate it. If you want reform, agree it. If you want a college of the future, stop trying to build it by destabilizing the present. The same honesty is required in adult education, because adult educators have had more than enough of being praised in principle and left to fight for basics in practice. Their work is indispensable. It opens doors for learners returning to education, for communities often left on the margins, for people seeking confidence, skill, and opportunity. Yet too often, the members who do that work are left navigating inconsistent implementation, insecure structures, and needless delays. There remains a persistent sense that while adult education is warmly spoken of, adult educators themselves are too often expected to make do. They're expected to adapt, to wait, to trust, and to carry uncertainty while others debate fundamentals that should have already been settled. Well, Minister, there is a point at which waiting ceases to be patience and becomes policy failure. No workforce should be expected to subsidise state indecision. Adult education cannot continue to operate on the basis that members absorb uncertainty while the system absorbs no responsibility. Minister, the TUI strongly condemns the cuts to ESOL and adult literacy funding and ETBs arising from a reduction in budget from Lawless. And we commend our members in GRETB for demonstrating already their dismay at these cuts. These cuts are unacceptable and short-sighted. They strike at some of the most important provision in further education: support for adult literacy, second chance learners, adults with additional needs, and those who rely on ESOL classes to participate fully in education, work, and community life. At a time when employers are crying out for workers, and when integration is rightly seen as a national priority, reducing ESOL provision makes no sense for learners, for staff, or for the wider economy. It is totally unacceptable that these cuts have come as a complete shock to those affected, including staff who are nearing the point of securing greater employment stability. The TUI is calling for the immediate reversal of these cuts and for urgent engagement to protect these vital services. And then there is Youth Reach. If any part of this speech carries a moral urgency beyond the industrial, it is this one. Because Youth Reach members are doing work of immense importance with some of the most vulnerable people in the state. They are carrying not just teaching, but relationship building, support and consistency, and increasingly the emotional weight that comes with working every day in environments where trauma and disadvantage are not abstract concepts, but lived realities. Staff know the risk of burnout. They know the frustration of hearing constant recognition of the programme's value while basic issues remain unresolved. So let us stop treating Youthreach as something that must constantly wait its turn. There is no justice in saying a programme is vital while leaving staff without fair structures. There is no seriousness in talking about inclusion while delaying movement on the calendar and associated conditions. There is no dignity in recognising burnout and trauma while failing to put the necessary supports in place. Youthreach members are entitled to more than sympathy. They are entitled to action. Minister, we've been told that the TUI proposal on the aligned calendar is on your desk awaiting a decision on that calendar. I now directly call upon you and your department to act on this proposal and engage with the TUI to finally bring Youthreach into alignment with second-level provision. Minister, when one steps back from these sectors, third level, VET, adult education, Youthreach, one sees the same pattern repeated in different forms. National problems being pushed downwards, agreements not fully honoured, forums not fully functioning, reform without enough framework, implementation without enough consistency, workload without enough recognition. Members expected to carry what the system has not yet resolved. This is the real state of affairs, and members know it, because they are the ones carrying the cost of it. And that is why this speech has to be sharper than the usual script, because it is not merely a question of efficiency. It is a question of respect. And increasingly, it is a question of credibility. A government that cannot convert agreement into delivery will eventually lose the right to speak in the language of partnership. If government wants the language of partnership to mean anything, then nationally significant issues must be progressed nationally. If a sectoral forum exists, it must produce sectoral outcomes. If a payment is due, it must be paid. If a minister signs off an agreement, the sector must feel the effect of that agreement in a lived reality, not in a deferred promise. If reform is proposed, it must come with the agreed frameworks, protections and resourcing. That is what a functioning system looks like. And if that is not what members are experiencing, then members are entitled to say so plainly. Minister, our Congress has already shown today what this union is about. It is about identifying where structures are failing and then refusing to look away. It is about insisting that the conditions and service of our members in every part of this union matters. It is about stating clearly that no part of the educational landscape should be run on ambiguity, delay, or good luck. And it is about reminding ourselves that when a sector becomes too accustomed to drift, eventually it will be governed by drift. We cannot allow that, because drift is never neutral. Drift always benefits those already comfortable with delay. That is why the motions before Congress matter. They are not procedural business. They are a diagnosis. They are an instruction, and they are a warning. And as this warning, I ask you now to heed on the 3% local bargaining provision under the Public Service Agreement be applied for cooperation with the introduction of professorships. It has not been progressed, and despite agreement at our bargaining unit, which I reinforce, our bargaining unit, it has not been resolved. This is something that the officials in FHERIS, the management's bodies, the presidents in the TUs and the IOTs and the TUI want. We are being told that the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform are refusing it. Now, Minister, I would be loath to create a public spat between you and your departmental minister, that of Minister Jack Chambers, but Congress is clearly offering guidance in this regard. Educational policy cannot be dictated by spreadsheet veto. We will decide what we do in higher and further education, and Deeper can examine spreadsheets and tabulate columns in Merrion Street. We will not allow their interference in what we do. Educational outcomes and the educational landscape of this country cannot be improved by civil servants who don't understand the complexities of their sectors, hawkishly counting cents and pennies. They may count the columns, but we will count the consequences. Minister, we also call upon your personal intervention in getting the bargaining units between the department and the TUI for FET members forging agreements and making progress for delegates here today, and in delivering the monies that were due to them from last September as a matter of absolute urgency. Money delayed is respect denied. So, Minister, the ask from this Congress is very simple. Make national negotiation fora work, or stop pretending it is working. Progress nationally significant matters nationally. Issue nationally agreed circular letters. Deliver the pay that is due. Stop leaving members to fight the same battles, institution by institution and ETB by ETB. Show in actions rather than assurances that your department intends to govern this sector rather than merely commenting on it. We need you to recognise that the people delivering further and higher education in this country have already shown more patience and professionalism than any serious system should ask of them. Commentary is not governance, and patience is not an infinite resource. In conclusion, Minister, vision without action is not enough. Fine words without real progress are not enough. It is not enough to say that the sector matters if the people who keep it going are not treated with respect and seriousness. Matters of national significance must be resolved nationally. Payments that are due must be paid. Proper answers must be given to the issues facing FET, adult education, youth reach and third level. And above all, the delay, uncertainty and drift that have taken hold in the system must come to an end. This union will stand by its members. We will speak clearly, and if necessary, we will act boldly. Our members have waited long enough, carried enough, and conceded enough. If this system will not change through goodwill and patience, then this union will force it to change through strength and solidarity. Go raibh míle maith agóibh.